Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Seattle Surge capped off a disastrous Major 2 campaign so far with another defeat to the Minnesota Rokkr a couple of days ago to close out a 1-in-4 record online in this stage. What is going on with this team going into the Major, despite Simp and Pred's continuous phenomenal performances, is a change necessary and inevitable after their tournament concludes, given the fact that they're starting in the losers bracket. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. If this is the second video of the day, everything's going as planned. You guys already know what's going on. I've probably just about landed in Boston for the Major. Very exciting. If this is the first video, I'm probably somewhere over the Atlantic right now, flying to Boston, which is also very exciting. And I might get a second video out later today. Who knows? Depends on the internet, all this type of stuff. But I'm trying to prepare some stuff for you guys. And then, well, I'll be at the venue for the next few days. Hopefully I get to meet some of you. That'd be very fun. Been a while since I've been to an event. Quick note, just an update really on what we saw the other day, because Puckett was talking about Asim getting him off London and stuff. I thought it was kind of interesting for the host of the league to be doing this, and then he actually mentions last night or a couple of days ago now, Havoc and Asim sub-duo, how do we make this happen? So presumably if it's going to happen anyway, it probably should happen over at Florida Mutineers. Would be an interesting idea. Whether Florida could get Asim, whether they'd want to, whether London could make that work, I don't know. Would be an interesting concept, and well, obviously it relies on both of these players, relatively inconsistent players, keeping up the high levels they have shown in these games so far this year. But speaking of high-level SMG play, we've got to mention Seattle Surge. Pred has been cooking in and out of games, say the TacticalRab Academy right here, and that's certainly true. You look at the numbers, but they're 2 in 7 in online qualifiers. Reminds me a bit, this team, of what happened with the Minnesota Rokkr. They had a great finish at the end of the Cold War season. They decided to run it back with that roster going into Vanguard. It never really worked out. They should have maybe taken the opportunity to pack a bunch in the offseason that year. They didn't. It didn't work in Vanguard. They paid the price. Surge maybe had the chance this past offseason to pack a bunch again, make a change. They didn't. They wanted to run it back with this team, and maybe they're paying the price now, right? Yes, they came in grand finals at Major 1. Not denying that, but in COD history, there's been plenty of outlier teams that have made grand finals at the first event of the season, and now over the course of multiple matches we've seen them play, they've just been incredibly underwhelming, especially in Search and Destroy. The fact that they have Pred and Simp continuously performing at a very high level, and yet their respawn gameplay, especially even in Control, hasn't been that good, and their Search and Destroy is woeful, is just not indicative, right? And look, Accuracy, known as the Iceman, this guy, you'd think would have crafted a relatively decent Search and Destroy system there, but it's just not working out for them, and the argument is that, you know, enough is enough. Something's got to give within this camp over the coming days. And we saw right after their loss to the Rokkr, frustrations did boil over a bit for Sib and Pred, and you can understand why. Yes, Sib individually didn't have a great series. Pred did again, and that's the thing, right? You can always usually rely on at least one of Pred and Sib going off, and when both of them do it, then they can pretty much beat anyone in the world. But if they don't both do it, it's kind of chalked, especially because they're Search and Destroy. You can never rely on Surge to 3-0. You can never rely on them to 3-2, because, you know, they've got to win a Search and Destroy for either of those circumstances to come true. And yeah, I mean, their Search has not been particularly good. These were the overall numbers as well, just to have a look at, because I don't feel like I discussed this as much as I should have done when this series concluded. Pred had over double the kills that Accuracy had, which is just like absolutely absurd. But yeah, it's true. 40 and 62 for Accuracy, 82 and 60 for Pred. And I mean, yeah, we do wonder. Obviously, Accuracy's done a lot for this team. His leadership, his crafting of the culture over there has been important, but at some point, star players often get frustrated with in-game leaders if they're not performing individually. Happens in multiple esports, and it probably is happening within this camp right now, because Pred, of course, said after the series, can't make this up. I perform like that, I drop a 1.3, I'm doing everything on the map, and we still lose 3-1 to secure their spot in the losers bracket. Had they have won, they'd have started in winners with a decent chance of making a run. They did it at Major 1, they could do it again here, but at this Major starting in losers, with the competition they'll have to play, they'll probably play Breach or FaZe round 1, and if they win that, they'll play, I think, either Toronto, Vegas, or Los Angeles Guerrillas. So none of those matches are easy, especially in terms of performing well in Search and Destroy, where they have not been on point so far. So I wanted to share for you guys a couple of thoughts on this that the guys on the flank had, Aches especially. We know his thoughts on Surge, but it now does seem to have reached a point where his point is valid, that, okay, yeah, they can beat anyone on their day because they've got the firepower to do it, but they're just not going to win anything consistently with this roster. It happened last year, but they kind of played well more often than they didn't. This year, they're pretty much negative in their records across the board, despite the incredible talent they have. They could probably improve basically every single team in the league right now, but yet Surge are arguably squandering that potential. So either they blow it up and make a change around Pred and Simp potentially, or one of those players or both of those players could go elsewhere.
I obviously think Sib has incredible upside, but I don't know. I kind of want to revisit the convo we had yesterday, because I absolutely am more confident than ever that this Seattle team, if they want to be a successful team this year, they have to make a change. I know they just got a second, but dude, this team is just like, you can't have people throwing up 0.5s randomly in series because true, they really suck in search, and then it's just like, okay, well, maybe they have some inconsistent respawns and stats don't tell the whole story. Who cares? These guys are getting Kentucky fried. The word to Don, they need more consistent slayers on this roster. And for me, Tom, I mean, losing to Rokkr in a game 1 seals the deal. Seattle Surge need to blow this up. But I think that because they're playing with 2 guys that they just cannot count on, they think in their head subconsciously they gotta be in the situation to ensure that the hill they had to flood.
Well, if they're thinking like that, then that's a problem.
They're gonna lose.
They shouldn't be thinking like that.
Tom, listen, when you play with people that are costing you, things start happening like that. I've seen it before on a lot of teams.
Pred's another one of those like just sub slayers. It's just when he's on, it's so annoying to deal with because he's just behind you or like he's always in your.
Are you still user?
Nah, Pred.
Surge looking to bounce back into this one. Here comes the hit. And you see
he's one of those roaming sub players that we see a lot of like roaming sub players nowadays. Like every team basically has one. Where they're just always moving, getting kills.
Scump also, of course, saying in that clip how difficult Pred is to play against. You look at the KDs from stage 2, Pred's top in the lot. Sib probably isn't too far off this list either, but Pred individually was out of control this time. And looking at the numbers in more detail, I mean, it's remarkable to me that Surge, in terms of map win-loss, a 31 in 34, 7 in 9 series win-loss. They did, of course, well at Major 1, right? And that's where they got all their 4 S&D wins, I believe. Their S&D record is 4 in 17. I mean, like, that's atrocious. Their hub win is fantastic. 17 and 11, 10 and 6 in control. But if you can't win a search, you're not going to win a series. And okay, you could maybe argue that, all right, yeah, fix their search, they're fine. But, I mean, man, I don't know if that's going to be enough, to be honest, because it's just so easy to lose to anyone when that's the case. Losing to Vegas game 5, losing to OpTic game 5. I mean, it's just all too predictable. Yes, they got to some round 11s, but I don't know if this is tenable long term, especially when this team should be doing better than they have done. I mean, look at some of the numbers here, right? Pred at 1.15, 1.2 for Sib in hardpoint, 1.03 for Pred in search and destroy. Accuracy's got a 0.65 overall. Similar story in the controls. You know, I don't know if accuracy is the man to go. I don't know if Mack's the man to go. I don't know if you want to make both changes, but I think Aches is right that at some point this team's got to decide, you know what, enough is enough. And you can always talk about potential and all this, but you bring in some other player, maybe instead of accuracy or Mack, that can deliver consistently in search and destroy, and this team's potential surely goes up. Okay, maybe you could argue their floor goes down, but like their floor is actually top 12 right now, right? Like this team is not consistent enough to even say that their floor is like top 8 because they're starting to lose us here going into the major. So what would you guys do if you were the Seattle Surge general management? Because of course we saw in December that the Pred to OpTic discussion was being had, negotiations were underway. There were rumors that maybe Seattle were going to sell Pred to OpTic. They were going to get Wardy in for the subliners bench. That was a brief rumor at the time. Turned out it didn't happen though because of all the drama with Surge not selling Pred. Hex and OpTic believe that they effectively offered 3 times, offers that were apparently accepted by, or Surge gave a number, OpTic agreed. That happened 3 times while Surge raised their prices before then saying, no, Pred's not for sale anymore. Surge disagree with that assessment, and now the discussion is being had that probably no deal is going to get done there before the end of the season because OpTic simply don't want to operate and negotiate with Seattle Surge until Pred and Sib both become free agents at the end of the year. And this is the issue for Surge. When they declined the, I don't know, 750k offer, whatever the rumored number is, for Pred during the Christmas and New Year break, they obviously had that offer on the table there. They could have taken it and sold Pred to OpTic and got the deal done. Now though, if OpTic don't want to do that deal anymore because they're obviously playing quite well, they maybe, you know, they could still, I think Pred would still be an upgrade for them, but nonetheless, they might not want to do that with Zeo being back, of course, and having a good time as OpTic seem to right now going into the major. Things could still change, but there's a question there, right, that if they play well with Huke at the major, they won't need Pred certainly yet, especially going into the home major where they might not want to switch things up. So now Pred's in a tricky spot where he almost joined OpTic. Now probably not going to happen anymore, at least until the offseason. It might well still happen then, but it probably won't happen now. So do Surge say, you know what, we didn't decide to get that money for Pred, so what we'll do instead, we'll build around Pred and Sib and we'll try and make it work to the end of the season, right? Because as I say, they're starting here in the losers brackets. They will play the loser of Boston versus FaZe. That's not going to be easy at all based on their current level of play. Okay, maybe they could win a series 3-1 against Boston or something against FaZe. I think it's going to be a tall order if they were to play them. And then in the next round, they play either Legion or the loser of Ultra and Guerrillas, both of which are pretty good teams. So, you know, it's interesting, right? But Surge are not going to have an easy path to top 6. And you'd think that for this team to stay together, they need to get top 4 or better. Probably need to make Sunday for this team to feel like it still has some future. But I do wonder if Sib and Pred especially kind of see the writing on the wall here, right? They're like, this isn't really going to work. We need some sort of upgrade somewhere. And the question is whether Phoenix, the coach of that team, is going to make a call at some point, and Revan, of course, the general manager, whether it's time to make a change. The issue is, though, for them is that I always wondered that when Accuracy was going to retire from competing, which I don't imagine that Accuracy will get another spot on the starting team. As I say, I think he's done a great job for this franchise over the last couple of years, but at some point, you know, his level was going to get to a point where him remaining as a player in the Pro League out of the 48 spots might not be so valid, and he's not going to go to Challengers. He might get a spot on another team to try and build a similar project that he's managed well with Seattle Surge, but I imagine that when he was going to be forced out or decided to retire from his spot, he would be, you know, going well into a coaching position, right? But of course, they've already got a coach, they've already got a general manager, so it creates a bit of a tricky environment there where if Accuracy was to step away, you'd think that would be the logical next step for him, but it might not be so easy to actually accommodate that. Could you replace Mack with another player as well? Because I think Mack is one of these more X-Factor players where it does seem like if he plays well, it does give them a much better chance of winning a series, but it hasn't really been the case, I feel like, by the numbers so far this year. He's been, honestly, kind of like, you don't notice Mack often on the map, I feel, in a lot of their series, which is unfortunate for him, but also for the team in general. So is there an upgrade there? Do you make a one-man? Do you make a two-man change? I don't know, but I think Search and Destroy has got to be the primary focus to fix this team on. I'm sure there's some Challenger SMG players they could go for out there, but I think there is a good argument to say that Surge have simply mismanaged the last few months. They could have maybe tried to pack a bunch in the off-season, they didn't, and I can understand why, but then they had an offer over the last couple of months to move Pred on, and he's going to move on anyway, you'd imagine, at the end of the season for a lot of money. They could have done a fair bit with that money potentially in terms of getting other players into the project. They decided not to, and now it might not be working out too well for them. A couple of things to close out the video here with, I thought was, I didn't get to touch this the other day. This is aBeZy's top 10, pretty similar to mine because, I mean, look, the top 5 I think are undisputed, even though aBeZy disagrees because he's put himself at 5, which I think is a bit optimistic to put himself over Formula in my opinion. I would have, you know, well, I showed you guys mine the other day. I actually think I had Jacob at 6 and aBeZy at 7, but it's nice to see my top 7 are the same as aBeZy, just differing order. Of course, he's going to put himself top 5, which is fair enough. Now, then he's got 8, 9, 10, I thought was very interesting. He actually doesn't have any of the tiny terrors here. No Simp, no aBeZy. In my opinion, they have got into that category now, but I can understand for some they might be on the fringes. Certainly for someone who values longevity, and also aBeZy obviously competed against all these guys. Like, these are obviously names that I had very close to my top 10, but I had Simp and aBeZy over them. Nice to see aBeZy in here, even though I don't think his career eclipses slashers from my perspective. He's got TV, of course, in here as well to round out the complexity dynasty. But yeah, pretty interesting the different perspectives here. I know a lot of people actually really liked this list and don't feel like Simp and aBeZy are there yet. But I mean, yeah, what they've achieved since they've come into the league, especially nowadays with less tournaments and stuff, I think is worthy of them being in the conversation. But in aBeZy's list, I wonder how long it's going to take for Simp and aBeZy to even get up higher in this list, right? Let's say they win the next 2 world championships and they're a 4-time world champion. Like, where do they sit then? Because in aBeZy's mind, they're certainly not going to be number 1, and I think for good reason as well. Like, you know, rings don't necessarily mean everything, as we see with Scump and some other names on this very list. And also this question that came out at a similar time: who's the most underrated player in the history of competitive Call of Duty? There are a lot of interesting names here that come to mind to me. I think that Crowder might be one of them. I think Enable also doesn't necessarily get the respect he deserves. The other name I do think is Jacob. I mentioned it before, the fact that like I have him at 6, maybe 7 on my all-time top 10 list, and a lot of people wouldn't even have him there. So I think maybe Jacob falls into the category. I know that some, including Methodz, said Slacked, a name that doesn't really get too much credit, but did actually win a lot and was very successful in this career, all things considered, given the teams that he played. Given the teams that he played on and the teammates he played with. But yeah, leave it for a few open questions for you guys today. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.